Have you ever heard the one about the giant lumberjack who dragged his axe across the country and created the Grand Canyon? Or how his giant blue ox Babe stomped so hard it carved out the Great Lakes? Yeah, same. But what if I told you Paul Bunyan, America's beloved tall-tale hero, may have been a total fabrication? Not by old-timey woodsmen, but by marketing teams. This is the story of how a giant man with an axe helped sell clear-cut forests to the American public. And no, this isn't folklore. This is capitalism, baby. You know Paul Bunyan, right? A towering giant. A plaid-wearing, pancake-eating, ox-riding symbol of frontier strength. He felled trees with a single swing. He made rivers flow with one achoo. He wrestled bears for breakfast and logged the Pacific Northwest before lunchtime. Did you hear? He once made Mount Rainier just by tripping over a pine cone. He shows up in children's books, old folk songs, and roadside attractions from Minnesota to Oregon. Sheesh. He's even got a festival, a statue, and a breakfast cereal. But here's the twist. Before the 1900s, there's basically no record of Paul Bunyan at all. The first real Paul Bunyan story in print didn't appear until 1910 in a Minnesota newspaper. That story was written by a guy named James McGillivray. And where did he get it? Logging camps. Lumberjacks used to sit around fires at night and swap stories. Some of them were funny. A lot of them were exaggerated and full of nonsense. But Paul was just one of many, not the guy. Their character wasn't even that consistent. In some versions, he was kind of a jerk. In others, he was tiny. Sometimes he didn't even have the ox by his side. But then something changed. A fella named William Loghead, working for the Red River Lumber Company in Minnesota, decided to package Paul into something a little more usable. And by usable, I mean brandable. In 1914, Loghead published a pamphlet filled with tall tales and used Paul Bunyan as the face of Red River Lumber's brand. He gave Paul a giant blue ox named Babe, dressed him in plaid, and exaggerated everything to mythic proportions. Our trees are so big it takes a giant to cut them down. Basically, buy our lumber, folks. It's worthy of a giant. Much to Loghead's delight, the pamphlet and marketing campaign was wildly successful. Essentially, an olden days viral post. Not surprisingly, other companies jumped on board, hoping to create the same success. Suddenly, this fictional lumberjack was the face of the entire logging industry. He became American folklore by design. Manufactured nostalgia, industrial-sized. Folklore with a barcode, if you will. This was more than just a catchy mascot. In the early 1900s, Americans were anxious about losing the frontier. The West, for the most part, was settled. Cities were growing, and industrialists needed to spin resource extraction into something romantic. In other words, the logging industry needed buy-in from the public. Enter Paul Bunyan, a strong, silent type who didn't whine about clear-cutting. He was the wilderness and the conqueror of it. He made destruction feel nostalgic. It was manifest destiny with a mustache. Behind the myth was a very real history. Millions of acres of old-growth forest destroyed. Dangerous logging conditions that killed workers. Exploitation of immigrant labor. Displacement of indigenous tribes whose lands were logged without consent. But hey, Paul Bunyan didn't talk about that. He just chopped trees and ate pancakes. Today, Paul Bunyan is a children's character. He appears in cartoons, theme parks, and roadside statues. Kids pose under his giant axe, never knowing he was the Ronald McDonald of the timber industry. And that's the weirdest part. Paul Bunyan feels ancient, mythic, but really, he's only about 100 years old. A tall tale with a footnote that reads, "Sponsored by the lumber industry." So next time you see a statue of Paul Bunyan towering over some sleepy Pacific Northwest town, just remember, you're looking at corporate storytelling at its weirdest. A giant who never lived, selling products that don't grow back. Because in America, even our folk heroes are marketing tools, and our myths, they're made of wood, flannel, and just a little bit of BS. If you enjoyed this story, give the video a like and subscribe for more weird and fascinating tales about the Northwest. Got something strange you think we should cover? Drop it in the comments. We would love to hear it. Thanks for watching.